Hey everybody, welcome to Teal Tinted Glasses, episode 13, I believe, of the newest incarnation of our show. Tonight we're going to talk about a few things. We got, we're going to really break down this Francis Boschman thing, so expect at least 25 minutes on that. We're going to talk some LA Kings. I mean, this is like, we're going to hit everything that Sharks fans want to talk about today. Like, this is going to be just an epic show. No, I mean, obviously, like, we're going to go through some of the news of the day. We're going to preview the LA Kings like we said we would last week. And, it's going to be awesome because it's always awesome. With me tonight is Mr. Hockey Jerk. Hockey Jerk, how you doing?
Can you hear me? I can't find my mute button. I'm still a little blinded from the sun.
Yeah, that's the only power I got from the eclipse too, and I am not Daredevil. Like, at least if I'm going blind, make me Daredevil. Like, come on, solar eclipse, work with me.
It's the only logical, outcome.
Right, exactly. But no, sadly, not Daredevil.
Yeah, I mean, what can you do though, right?
Steve Cropper, it will eclipse anything that happened today. I'm hoping so. How much of the eclipse did you see where you were?
Okay, so as a college student, when I don't have school, I spend most of my time sleeping. Okay. So I woke up this morning, looked out the window, saw the sky was a different color, and was like, okay. And that was about it.
Yeah, it got like a little bit dim here. We only got like about a 70% of the eclipse, so it got a little dim. I remember there was an eclipse that we saw. I want to say it was like in like the early 90s, dating myself here, and it was more and it was darker, and this one didn't get nearly as dark, and I was kind of disappointed. And it was like a little bit darker, but it was just meh. I was disappointed. It underwhelmed me, and I still went blind anyway. So I mean, this is garbage.
Yeah, I mean, it goes to show how strong it was. I mean, those 3 seconds of looking outside my window were, as intense, if not more, than all the time I spend in my regular day-to-day life staring at the sun. So it goes to show how much of a phenomenon it was. And for those of you who missed out, don't worry, because in a very short 6.5 years, we can all go to the Midwest and see it again.
That's true. I'm excited. All right. Because I'm going to go this time, I think. No, I'm not.
Hopefully, and the St. Louis Blues will still be looking for their first Stanley Cup by that point.
Probably. And I'll be looking for my eyesight. That's how it works, right? You just stare at another one and you get your eyesight back.
I mean, I think so. I'm trying to think of what you could compare it to. I think it's about the same. Like, you stare at it enough to where you get used to it.
Fair enough. All right. Let's see here. Okay, we should probably talk about some hockey now that we've got the eclipse out of the way and how we gained the new superpowers of blindness, but not Daredevil blindness, which is garbage. The NHL released their top 20 centers list. They've released a few other lists too, and I didn't find them anything overly noteworthy, or maybe we just had a packed enough show that we didn't need to go to it. Today, not so much. So I'm just going to read them off, and then we will we can discuss briefly here. In depth, who knows? So number 1 is Connor McDavid. Number 2 is Sidney Crosby. Number 3 is Evgeny Malkin. Number 4 is Austin Matthews. Number 5 is Nicholas Backstrom. Number 6 is John Tavares. Number 7 is Steven Stamkos. Number 8 was Tyler Seguin. Sorry. Number 9 is Ryan Getzlaf. Number 10 is Mark Scheifele. Number 11 is Patrice Bergeron. Number 12 is Jonathan Toews. 13 is Anze Kopitar. 14, criminally low, is Jack Eichel. 15 is Leon Draisaitl. 16 is Ryan Johansson. 17 is Barkov. 18 is Jeff Carter. And 19 is Evgeny Kuznetsov. And number 20 is Sean Monahan. What say you?
Well, there are a couple things that stood out to me here. And one of them I pointed out on Twitter, Leon Draisaitl, who has made most of his money as a winger, is listed on the centers list. And I know the long-term goal is for him to be a center, but as it stands right now, he's a right winger who cashed in on playing with Connor McDavid. I have a hard time believing that you could ask any but Sharks fan who would say that Joe Pavelski is a center.
Right, like that's kind of my opinion too. It'd be like putting Joe Pavelski on the list as a center.
Exactly. And like you said, Jack Eichel, criminally underrated. I would have him above Kopitar, Taves, and Bergeron on that list, and that's another part of this list that I had a problem with. Was, I mean, Anze Kopitar, an otherwise consistent career besides for, you know, one off year, so I feel he gets a mulligan in that respect. But I mean, you look at guys like Jonathan Taves and Patrice Bergeron, who, I mean, yes, they're good defensively, and I mean, that's a good asset to have, no doubt. But, you know, statistically, their points have gone down every year, it seems like, for the last 3 or 4 years. And, you know, 50 to 60 points is good, don't get me wrong. But in the terms of Bergeron, who's making, I believe, $8 million, and Jonathan Taves, who's at 10.5, you know, is 50 to 60 points worth it, you know? And we even asked when we covered the Edmonton Oilers, you know, when Leon Draisaitl got $8.5 million for 70 plus points, we even asked if 70 points was worth $8.5 million. And now you have these two guys who are making more money and scoring less than that. So,
yeah,
you know, I think I tend to not enjoy these top tier lists only because I feel like there's a good chunk in the middle where it's like, I had him here, I had him here, I didn't even have him on my list, you know? And it's like, there's so many different ways that you can look at a player. Like, if, you know, if you're looking at this, you know, top 20 defensive centers, I bet you Bergeron, Taves, and Kopitar are at the top of the list versus, you know, top 20 offensive centers. They're probably right where they are. And it's just, I don't know. These lists I tend to feel are a little overplayed. Yeah, but I just thought they were too high. And then even guys like, you know, Kuznetsov and Sean Monahan, who, again, haven't, you know, hit that, you know, point per game or over point per game threshold, but, you know, they've done some good things while making less money, you know? So with Kuznetsov, it's a little different because he just got the big extension. But, you know, Sean Monahan is a guy who I've always felt has been underappreciated throughout his entire career when, you know, it's very apparent that he drives the bus that is the Calgary Flames. And I don't know, I could see him be higher. I could definitely see him be over those three I mentioned.
Yeah, I mean, I look at this list and, like I said, Jack Eichel is, I think, is too low. But, you know, you could say that for a couple names here. Is Mark Scheifele better than Anze Kopitar? I don't think so. Could he be eventually? Maybe, but right now, I don't think he is. Like, if you take out, like, if you look at Kopitar just as one of the centers, like, I think Anze Kopitar should be higher. I think yes, he had a bad season, and we'll talk about that in a bit. But I just, you know, I don't know. I just feel like he should be higher. Do you have a problem with McDavid being higher than Crosby, which seems to be the talk of the day? So of course we're going to hammer that because we got to be cool like all the other cool radio shows and other podcasts.
You know, I don't have a problem with it only because I feel like, and again, there's a lot of ways you can look at this. You know, you can argue that McDavid is more important to the Oilers than Crosby is to the Penguins. And I mean, you know, Crosby has the speed on him. You know, he put up 100 points this year. And I mean, yes, Crosby is still a good player and he had a really good year this year. But with the injury history, you don't know at one point he's going to, you know, go off the cliff. And especially if he gets another injury, it's, with him, it's so hard to say. And I mean, like I said before, I think these lists are so, you know, I think
because there's no criteria ever like this is the list and this is the criteria it's based off. It's just this is our list. Discuss, which I mean it's fine. It's summer, whatever.
Well, and you know, and that's you bring up a really good point too, because depending on, you know, if you take this group of 20 players and you compare it, you know, over the last 5 seasons, I guarantee you this list would change every year. And you know, something else I didn't even really notice until just now, but you know, Austin Matthews ahead of Backstrom and Tavares. I don't know how I feel about that, only because I believe over the last 5 seasons, nobody's has more power play assists than Nicholas Backstrom. So I think that gets you to be at least higher than Austin Matthews, who,
agreed.
Yes, he had a good year, but he's had, you know, 1 year.
I don't understand how, like, yes, okay, 40 goals, I get it, but I don't understand how that is suddenly you're the number 4 center in the league. I like Austin Matthews. Look, I'm not gonna say I don't like Austin Matthews. I've very publicly stated on this show many million times I love Austin Matthews, but 4 and then Jack Eichel 14, like it's so funny how quickly this is turned, you know, when like this goes back to something I've kind of beaten to death. This is like this is the new horse that I beat now. And it's this forgotten Jack Eichel, like how Jack Eichel got completely just lost in the shuffle this year because, you know, he got injured to start the year. By the time he was healthy, Buffalo was well out of it. And then, you know, and then you look at what happened in Toronto and Edmonton, obviously, and, you know, what's left for Jack Eichel at that point. But I just like, it amazes me how, like, people are basically flat out just sleeping on Jack Eichel at this point. And I think it's a huge mistake. You look at him, he missed a quarter of the season, came back and led his team in points. Like, you know, and look at, I mean, yes, Buffalo was pretty bad, but it's not like it's, you know, not like they don't have offensive talent there. You know, there's guys like Ryan O'Reilly and Evander Kane, like these guys can put points on the board. So, you know, for him to come back, like, I just think like it's amazing how much people are sleeping on Jack Eichel at this point. I think it's a huge mistake. Like if he's popping up, you know, in your pool, man, scoop him up.
So yeah, seriously. So question for you. Okay. How do you feel about Alex Barkov being 17?
It's hard, man. You know, it's like you said, you get to the end of the, you know, like I like Ryan Johansson too. It's so hard to really, without a criteria, it's really like, I like Barkov. I think Barkov's great. Now, granted, of a lot of these guys, Barkov's one of the guys I've watched the least of, so it's hard for me to, you know, to really go to bat for him. But I just, you know, again, it kind of gets to that point, like you said, you get to the middle of the list and you could shuffle it 600 ways and you're not going to find a consensus. Should Barkov be higher than Draisaitl? Absolutely.
Yeah, well, and see, that creates a new brand of questions. You know, like you said, should Barkov be higher than Draisaitl? But more importantly, should Draisaitl be on this list? You know what I mean? Like, it just creates way too many questions. And, you know, I would make the argument that Kuznetsov and Monahan deserve to be ahead of Alex Barkov. And I believe somebody in the chat said that Logan Couture was ranked 25. But honestly, you know, between Barkov and Logan Couture, I think they're much closer than 17 and 25, if you ask me.
It's, you know, here's the problem with Couture, though, is Couture plays behind. Like, all these guys on this list, most of them, other than Malkin, who would be a number 1 center on any other team, let's not make any bones about it, these guys are all number 1 centers. Couture plays behind Thornton, who is 24th on the list. And I think that, you know, so you're making these lists, it makes it more difficult because all these guys are legit number 1 centers on their team. Couture's the number 2 guy on the Sharks. And until that changes, he's not going to move up the list.
We should make our own list. It's top 20 second line centers who could be first line centers.
Evgeny Malkin, Logan Couture. I'd have to play. Yeah, Kuznetsov. Yeah, we should do that. We'll have a little bit of a layoff. I think we should probably do that. Second line centers that could be first line centers on other teams. Yeah, I like that. But I think, you know, I agree Logan Couture could be on the list. It's just difficult when you're, you know, when he's playing behind Thornton, like until that shadow dissipates, like it is what it is.
Right. And I feel like you could, you know, argue the same thing with Connor McDavid and Jack Eichel. You know, I mean, you know, Eichel, I feel any draft between Crosby's draft and his draft, he goes number 1. And I want to find the person who disagrees with me on that.
He goes number 1, and he goes number 1 in the Austin Matthews draft too.
Agreed 1,000%. And, you know, I just feel like, you know, Jack Eichel referred to like, oh, he's a really good consolation prize. It's like, no, he's a generational talent who just so happens to be living in the shadow of another generational talent. And I think until Buffalo makes the playoffs, I think people are going to continue to sleep on Jack Eichel, despite the fact that, you know, when you compare their very short careers, you know, they've done, I wouldn't. They haven't obviously. McDavid has more points, but they've had the same level of impact with their team, which has been a very high impact. And I think had things gone, different ways for Buffalo, I think they could have been a playoff team, no doubt.
What's the difference between Buffalo and Edmonton? Cam Talbot.
And you could make an argument for Rasmus Ristolainen.
Yeah. Like, I mean, that's like, to me, that's the difference, right? Like, Buffalo, Robin Leonard was really good last year, but he wasn't Cam Talbot. Like, I know a lot of people are really high on the Oilers after this last season, and I understand it. And it's probably, look at they're in a wide open division now. So are the Sabres, for that matter. I don't think the Atlantic Division is incredibly difficult compared to the Metro. Just like the Pacific is, it's competitive, but nothing like the Central. And I feel like, so I don't know. I just feel like if Buffalo had, like, Edmonton, there's some better pieces in place, probably. Like Leon Draisaitl's really good. Can he be the number 2 center at some point? That's the question. Can he be that guy without, riding shotgun with McDavid? And then at that point, what happens to Ryan Nugent-Hopkins? He has the better supporting cast, and Austin Matthews definitely has a better supporting cast.
Well, and you bring up a really good point too when it comes to Leon Draisaitl, and I feel like the last 4 shows we've talked about this, but he, even the year, the McDavid's first year, he spent a good chunk of the time playing center and still, almost hit 60 points. So thought, you can say, yeah, he can be a number 2 center, maybe a number 1 center if need be. But then you look at the flip side of that, they being the Edmonton Oilers, paid Leon Draisaitl for 1 year of being a top line right wing. Now, what happens, say, Nugent Hopkins is traded or moved to the wing or what have you, let's say Leon Draisaitl is your number 2 center, right, and only hits that 50 to 60 point threshold like he did the previous year. All of the sudden is $8.5 million worth Leon Draisaitl.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. We should probably move on though. So a Swedish publication, I'm going to try and pronounce this, reports that Zetterberg is set to retire after the 2018/19 season. Sad, as you added in practice, which is true. It's interesting because, like, the article kind of went on to say that, those extra years were just to screw with the cap, blah, 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 which I think is fantastic. Because for those that don't know, the last 2 years of Zetterberg's contract, he makes $1 million because that was what you did when his contract was signed. You signed for how long you had to play and made real money, and then you just tacked on a few $1 million at the end to drop the salary cap hit. And the expectation was always that if you retired, then those would go away. And because he signed the deal before he was 35, his cap hit will go away when he retires, unless they make up a rule over the summer, and don't rule that out because Gary Bettman's a vindictive dude. Well,
and I was in the same school of thought as you, but I was reading today, and it sounds like there would be cap recapture for Zetterberg, unless I totally read the particular article wrong.
There might be. I mean, they've kind of. I know they've changed things to go after these contracts, so I mean, there might be. I mean, my understanding could be wrong. I feel like I have a decent grasp of the CBA, but it's still a bajillion page legal document that is a legal document, and I am not a paralegal. I am not a lawyer. I play one on this podcast often, but at the end of the day, I mean, that could be true. I will double check that, and we will revisit that sometime in the future. But even if there is recapture, it would be tiny, I think.
Yeah, I imagine it wouldn't be very much, although...
Because I thought recapture only happened if you traded the contract.
You might be right, actually, now that I think about it. I don't know. It was staring at the sun has gotten me all sorts of confused. I'm not entirely sure what's happening anymore.
Right. No, exactly. Like, I don't know.
Although, speaking of salary cap hell, our friend Ian Reed did an article about the Detroit Red Wings and I read it and I was very impressed. So you should check that out if you haven't yet.
Yeah, it's amazing like how many like comments, like positive feedback I got from actual Detroit fans. So I felt really good about that.
See, that's always nice. That's why like I enjoy like if I ever spout off some hot take like about the Edmonton Oilers, like Trin Potrats will hit me up and he's like, "Yeah, I agree with that." I'm like, "Okay, good. I'm doing the right thing."
Yes. Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah. I mean, they're, oh man, what a cap mess that is. And that really, I mean, recapture doesn't really help. I mean, there's really nothing that's going to help that team. But you should read the article because yeah, there's a lot of good stuff in there. And I also, actually, it was a 2-for-1 day. I also wrote one about the Dallas Stars, which is also out. And you can read that as well.
Well, there you go.
So there you have it. It was a 2-for-1 day over at Puck Pros. Francois Beauchemin, the big news of the day. Francois Beauchemin signs with the Anaheim Ducks a 1-year, $1 million deal with $500,000 in performance bonuses that he can attain. I don't understand this.
Yeah, it's curious. You traded Shea Theodore to the Vegas Golden Knights,
Right.
and you allowed the Vegas Knights to take a Clayton Stoner.
Yeah.
And the mindset with that was to get your top four being Lindholm, Vatanen, Fowler, and Josh Manson. You're kind of stuck, you being the Anaheim Ducks, you're kind of stuck
Right.
having Kevin Bieksa as your fifth defenseman, whatever, but then you look, they re-signed Corbanian Holzer, sixth defenseman. They still have Brandon Montour, I believe. Yep. Brandon Montour.
Yep,
I get it, being that the Anaheim Ducks are going to go to the Western Conference Final. I could see why you want a sturdy, reliable defenseman, but a team like the Ducks, play the young guys. You've shown that you are the best team in the Pacific. Why?
I mean, it just, to me, like, the part that I don't get is you still have, like, Kevin Bieksa isn't going anywhere.
Right.
Like, this seems like a completely unnecessary transaction. I mean, I guess, maybe they just like the guy, and maybe he ends up being the 7th D, and that's not the end of the world. But I look at this blue line and I think, why? Like, it's just so unnecessary. You can't have, I mean, I guess if you want your guys playing down in San Diego, then Beauchemin's a fine player to have sitting, in the press box more often than not, so that guys can play in San Diego. But aside from that, like, if he starts seeing regular ice time, it blows my mind.
And I mean, Beauchemin coming in and Stoner going out, I mean, they still came out ahead, when it comes to the salary cap. But like you said, it's just, I don't know, in terms of the type of player, it seems like a lateral move, and you no longer have Shea Theodore,
Right. Yeah. No, exactly. Like, it just, I don't know, man. It makes no sense. I'm just reading the chat here. Yeah, Vince with #grit. Of course, that cannot be understated. Of course.
Man, it sucks. Both of my fake teams are making questionable moves. It's not a good time to be a fake fan.
Yeah. No. We've got some division rankings going on in the chat right now. We've got Racist Fan Rock saying Oilers, Ducks, then Flames. We got what do we got here? I'm just saying what Rob says. Says Anaheim, Edmonton, Calgary.
AO12345 saying no one betting on the Yotes. I always bet on the Yotes.
They're my dark horse.
The Yotes are one of my teams that I pretend to be a fan of. So
right,
we're going all the way this year.
Speaking, it's good though, because this actually segues really nice into the next topic, where the Hockey News they put out predictions of teams that would miss the playoffs, and the last team on their list was your San Jose Sharks. How does that make you feel?
Well, it doesn't make me feel nervous about the season because, as me, you, and friend of the show Zach Devine all kind of passed around a few months ago. That's a very real possibility when you consider that a handful of the teams in the Pacific have all gotten better, and the Sharks at best have stayed exactly where they were at.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't think that they're 100% right in saying that the Sharks are going to miss the playoffs, but I don't think they're totally smoking the good stuff either,
Yeah, see, here's my thing, right? Like, I don't think it's outside. Like, I know a lot of people were, and fans are fans, right? I do try to remain somewhat objective, obviously, although I do have my, just completely fan out moments. And I don't think missing the playoffs is out of the realm of possibility. Like I said on the show before, this isn't something that, I think is, not enough has to fall off the rails for this to be a possibility. I think that very little has to go wrong, and that could be a thing. The thing that I'm questioning, and we'll talk about this probably next show, is I'm just not sold Calgary is that much better. Like, I need to see it, because I feel like Calgary, and this is going with the idea that the Central will take the 2 wildcard spots, which seems to be the going thing this summer.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Like, we've just wasn't Calgary supposed to be better last year? I know they made some good moves this offseason, but I thought, we thought they did last season too. Like, I can't. I need to see it. I'm not sold that Calgary is better, that going to be that much better than the Sharks this year.
See, and I'm of the different thought where I mean, I don't think the Flames will be better, but I don't think they will be better than the Sharks, but I think they will be better. They added, Travis Hamonic, who is a legit top 2 defenseman, if you ask me, and you add him to an already stacked up blue line. And I mean, who needs draft picks, right? And
True.
And then, you pick up Mike Smith, who some would argue was a lateral move from Brian Elliott / Chad Johnson. But at the same time, Mike Smith has shown that with a good defense in front of him, he can be that goalie that took Coyotes to the Western Conference Final a couple years ago.
It wasn't that was like 5 years ago, though, no?
Yeah, and that's the caveat
right
to this, is that was 5 years ago, and we haven't seen Mike Smith return to that level since then. So I'm with you in that I need to see the on-ice product to make a judgment call, but at the same time, I do believe that they are better than...
I think they're better, but I felt like for a while now, like on paper, this should be one of the best defensive cores in the league when you look at top to bottom. Like, that should be one of the better D cores in the league. So it's crazy how fast Brian Elliott fell on his face in Calgary.
I mean, not to put myself on a pedestal or anything, but I was never really a fan of Brian Elliott. I mean, you think about how many times somebody had to bail him out in St. Louis, whether it was Jake Allen, Yaroslav Halak, Marty Brodeur.
Right.
He's had so many guys who've had to bail him out in St. Louis. And, the reason why I feel Brian Elliott looked so good was because he was in a 1B type situation. And then you throw him to the Wolves and, he cracked under the pressure.
I kind of always felt like it was kind of like the opposite, like, well, other than Brodeur being brought in, because I think that, that season, but I felt like, every time, like, Brian Elliott was a guy where every time the Blues tried to hand the reins over to somebody else, he'd just outplay them.
Right.
Outplay, like he wouldn't completely take the job, but he would never give it up. Like, it kind of reminds me of like the dance with Jimmy Howard and Peter Mrazek in Detroit, where it just seems like every time they think, okay, this is our guy, the other one steps up and throws it all with the wash. Like,
yeah, no, you bring up a good point. Man. Yeah, it's tough. I feel like you ask a certain group of people and they say that Brian Elliott is the guy, and then you ask a different group of people and it's, he's no better than Alex Stalock in his last year with the Sharks. Goalies are weird,
Right. No, exactly. Yeah. No, goalies are voodoo. as friend of the show Zach Devine likes to point out. Yeah, I mean, so I think that yes, Shark fans be annoyed, especially if you are a Shark super fan. Be annoyed for sure. Be angry. Yeah, they said you were going to miss the playoffs, and you should be upset about that. I think if you're on the more objective side of things, I think that it's a possibility, and I don't think it should be one that's ruled out. A lot of things are going to have to go right for the Sharks to really contend for a Pacific title this year. Like a lot of things have to go right. Like you're talking like career years from like Hurdle and then some of the kids to really step up. And obviously health too. Like Logan Couture needs to stay healthy this year. But yeah, I mean it's not outside the realm. I think the Pacific is a lot more wide open than it looks this year.
I'll say this. If San Jose wins the Pacific Division this year, then I will sell my Twitter handle to somebody. How's that?
Nice. Man.
Somebody else can be the jerk. You can have my seat on all of my podcasts.
Oh wow.
In other words, I don't think it's going to happen.
Yeah.
I think Anaheim, I don't think they've gotten better, but I think they're already better. Same thing goes with Edmonton. I like the addition of UC Jokinen.
Yep.
And then Calgary. I think Calgary's gotten better. And even, I believe it was AO in the chat, don't sleep on the Coyotes. And you said it as well.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't sleep on the Coyotes. The other thing too with Edmonton is the other big factor too is Jesse Puljujarvi. That's another name that I wouldn't sleep on because by the end of his time, I thought in Bakersfield, I thought he had really come around and started showing signs of why he was so highly touted going into that draft.
I think it's going to be an interesting dynamic when it comes to Puljujarvi and UC Jokinen. I think there will be like a, dad, son, uncle, nephew type of thing going on there. I think I will be surprised if they don't start on the same line this coming season.
I love like some of these questions in the chat, and I always can't get to them, but we always get like the Factor Fictions from Robin Now Races, Fan Rocks, and he says Factor, Carolina makes the playoffs, and then Vince replies, are you trying to summon Drew because that's how you summon Drew?
His ears are probably burning.
His ears are probably burning. Sleepy Mofo wants to know why everyone's sleeping on the Golden Knights because they're going to be terrible. Them in Vancouver fighting for the bottom.
I don't know. I just want to see, and it's another one of those things where you have to see it on the ice to know for sure. But I mean, I like to consider myself an expert, but I just don't know. I just don't know how having, like 12 NHL defensemen works for your team. Do some of them play forward? I mean, I don't know. Vegas is interesting. I think Vegas is a team like Buffalo. They have some good firepower up front. They have a good goalie. I think if things can fall the right way, then they might contend for a wild card spot. But I think the key here, or the caveat for those of you keeping score on the secret word tracker,
nice.
The caveat here is that defense. I mean, they've already traded 3 defensemen, and they still have like 1,000 more. So something's got to give.
Look at Vegas was built to suck. They went all in on futures during the expansion draft. This is this is a team. Look at I want to think nice things for the Vegas Golden Knights, but I just feel like this is the plan. The plan is to be completely crappy. They've got a ton of draft picks for the next 6 years. This is a team that could really turn around really, really quickly. It's going to be interesting to see who gets retained beyond this year because a lot of the players this year are going to be out of contract next year. But it'll be interesting to see what happens but this team's built to suck, and suck they will, and that's good.
And you bring again, you're firing off with the good points here tonight. I don't know. In my eyes, the team that I drafted on capfriendly.com was better than the team that was actually drafted, in real life.
Same here.
I don't know, as Vegas, you want to take on some crappy contracts because, I mean, the amount of draft picks Vegas has the next 3-4 years is
It's silly.
It's not fair at all.
It isn't fair. No, it isn't. But I mean, hey, that's what $500 million gets you.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, and that's the thing is I feel like Vegas has put themselves into a good position where, like I said, if things fall in the right place, they can be a playoff team. But, worst case scenario, they'll just take their 10,000 first round picks and build themselves a team.
Yeah. AO is saying fact or fiction. Golden Knights only last a decade in Vegas before moving. Fiction. It's
money talks.
Yeah. Look at. Are the Coyotes still in Arizona?
For now.
How long have they been there?
I believe this is season number 20.
Is it 20 or 25? I feel like it's 25.
However long ago 96 was.
Okay, maybe it's
20.
20. All right. Here's the thing. The Gary Bettman is very specific about where he puts teams. The only reason the Thrashers moved was because there was absolutely no other option for the Thrashers.
Right.
Like, that's the only reason the Thrashers moved, because the NHL did not have another choice. Everything fell so quickly. There was nothing else the NHL could do. They had, they had Winnipeg kind of waiting in the wings, and so far, it's worked. But I don't think it's going to come down to that with Vegas. The NHL puts teams in places very, very specifically, and I don't foresee that changing. Gary Bettman does not give up on teams. Well, and Vegas is a huge get for them because it's a market that they're going to be in first. And, I think that matters. I think that, and it's a television thing too. You can't have a good television deal if you're not covering as much of the United States as you can.
Well, and that's something that we talked about a couple shows ago, where, when it came up, should the NHL go to Seattle or Portland or Quebec, it was like, from the NHL standpoint, you want the NHL, sphere of influence to be as far as possible. So, you can throw all the expansion teams, in Central North America, mm-hmm. or, you can try for a Southern California or a Florida or a cold as hell, Quebec.
Right.
You try and reach as far as possible because, like I said, you want the sphere of influence to be as far as possible. And I don't know. I mean, like you said, I think the Thrashers didn't really have another choice. And, and that's, and that's another thing too, is, I recall reading, there was a Save the Thrashers rally right before they were sold to Winnipeg, and I think less than like 500 people showed up.
And not only that, the ownership of the Thrashers sent the NBA mascot.
What the hell? But then you look at the Phoenix/Arizona Coyotes, where they've put up some crappy seasons, and they've had so much drama with the arena, but
right,
like we talked about last week, they still have some really passionate fans there, and
absolutely
they haven't. And that was the difference between Arizona and Atlanta was, Arizona actually has a team that's worth watching. Even the last 2 years when they were crap, they're a team that's worth watching, if you ask me.
And you had people, I mean, when Arizona was going through its problems and, trying to get that lease with Glendale, people were petitioning for Glendale to sign that lease, as terrible as it was.
Mm-hmm.
Like legitimately petitioning and stuff. So I think that matters. I think the NHL, obviously, like I said, they don't like to give up on markets. AO asks, why doesn't Quebec have a team? So that's a great question. And at the risk of my Canadian citizenship, I'm going to answer it. 2 factors for Quebec City. 1, it's on the wrong side of the country. There's already enough teams in the East. They need teams in the West. And you don't want to do something like realign and push Columbus back to the West. Because I think that's, for a team like Columbus, that would be a problem for them for sure. The other problem is when you look at a lot of these other cities that the NHL has expanded to, they have large metropolitan areas around them. Around Quebec City, there is a large population of forest creatures. There's not really much to draw people in. And from a television standpoint, they're already covered because of the Montreal Canadiens, obviously, basically have television rights from Quebec into the Maritimes. So they're covered TV-wise. The Canadian dollar is lower, and there's not a huge population around Quebec City to draw from. So corporate dollars are going to be really low. Look, at Quebec City is a beautiful, beautiful city, but it's just, I question how they would survive, especially if the dollar takes another tumble. Whereas, and even Winnipeg's going to have trouble if the dollar tumbles really hard again. And I think that's an important thing to take into consideration. And they're on the wrong coast. Look, they can have that arena there, and they can do just like they did with Winnipeg. If a team on the East runs into trouble, let's say, and I'm just spitballing here, I'm not saying these teams are going to move. Let's say the Hurricanes found themselves back in trouble. Let's say the Panthers find themselves back in trouble. Now, I don't think either one of these teams are going to move anytime soon, but then you have a arena in Quebec just waiting for a team. And if the NHL runs into another situation like they did with the Thrashers, they have a building now that they can quickly move a team into. And I think that's it.
And you bring up the forestry, and you can kind of look at the Ottawa Senators in that same respect. The Canadian Tire Center is almost a half hour away from their downtown. Right. And it's why the last year and a half there's been so much talk about Ottawa. Ottawa needs a new arena. Ottawa needs an arena closer to downtown. I mean, picture living in downtown San Jose, and if you want to go to a Sharks game, you have to drive to Gilroy in rush hour traffic. That's kind of what you're up against.
I don't know what that means, but I'm hoping everyone else does.
Gilroy is about, depending on the time of day, anywhere from like 35 to maybe 50 minutes away from San Jose.
Okay. And Show brings up a good point. The Senators are getting an arena because the NHL has learned, and just sports in general, I think, have learned that these out-of-the-way arenas, yes, it's easier to get the land and it's probably cheaper to build and blah, blah, blah. But downtown arenas generally do better. And this is something the Coyotes learned the hard way. This is something the Panthers, I think, learned the hard way. And this is something Ottawa learned the hard way. Canada, nice area of Ottawa, nice area of, kind of Ottawa, not really. But it's a hike out. Rob's asking, do the Flames leave Calgary? Not a chance. It's just posturing. Don't read anything into that. The NHL, again, doesn't like to move teams. There's no way in heck they're moving another Canadian team. So anyway, we should probably talk about the LA Kings, since we've kind of just spun our tires a little bit in the chat, helping us out. Thank you, chat. So coming in for the Los Angeles Kings this year is Michael Camilleri. Rob Blake is now the GM, and John Stevens is the head coach. Outgoing is Dean Lombardi, Daryl Sutter, Ben Bishop, Jerome McGinley, who were both deadline acquisitions, for what it's worth, and defenseman Matt Green was bought out. So I think something that we could say for the Kings, who missed the playoffs last year, obviously, could really have anything more gone wrong for the Kings? And I think that's an interesting question, because I think when you talk about, when you make predictions and you go, well, yeah, the Kings kind of suck now, but could really have much more gone wrong for them?
I mean, they could have had another player get arrested.
That's oh wow, yes, yes, that's true. They definitely could have had somebody oh, that's good. I was not expecting that. Oh man, I don't know why I wasn't expecting that. I should have, but I was not, and now I'm glad we brought this up. I mean, when you look at this team, though, like, for me, here's the thing with this team. Is Anze Kopitar going to have a season like last season? I doubt it. But, I mean, anything's possible, but I really, really doubt it. I think Kopitar's down season, pretty bad. I'm pretty sure Toffoli missed a ton of games last year. Problematic. Jonathan Quick obviously goes down with injury. Now, Zenroth did a pretty damn good job in his absence, and it seemed like things really kind of went off the rails when Quick came back. Also, the Ben Bishop signing completely blew up in their face, because he won 2 of the 9 or 7 or 9 games he played. You think he won 2 of them?
Yeah, the Ben Bishop acquisition was questionable considering Jonathan Quick was back and Peter Budaj had, dragged the dead.
Oh yes, Peter Budaj, not Jonas Enroth. I don't know what I was thinking.
Yeah, he, dragged the dead carcass that was the LA Kings towards a playoff spot. But there's, like you said, there's just so many things that went wrong. I mean, now there are a handful of things that did go right.
Mm-hmm.
You had, and when I say handful, it's a very small handful where, Jeff Carter showed, kind of what he was showing his first couple seasons when he was with Los Angeles. I thought Tanner Pearson had a really good breakout year, and he earned a contract extension for it. That's pretty much the only good that came out of it. That and missing the playoffs and, getting a quality draft pick because, Lord knows they could use as many quality draft picks as possible. But, so much went bad for them. I mean, like you said, Kopitar had a down year.
Not even just like down, like Kopitar had if just an underwater year, like he rounded last year. It was like one of the most amazing drops I've seen in some time.
Yeah, exactly. And, Tyler Toffoli had a down year. Jonathan Quick was hurt. Who else am I thinking of? Dustin Brown. I don't want to say he continued to decline, but he sure as hell hasn't gotten better. And, Marian Gaborik, who has a history of, being hurt, was hurt to start the season and is now hurt again.
Mr. for sure.
Yeah, and Marian Gaborik hasn't really been, he had that good playoff run with LA his first season, but ever since he signed that extension, which I even criticized way back when at the time,
for sure.
I mean, he's declined at an accelerated rate, which really shouldn't come as a surprise. So, I mean, yes, you have 2 Stanley Cups to show for it, and that's nice, but, our Stanley Cups, I mean, yes, Chicago has their own set of problems, but at least Chicago is still kind of competitive. But you look at like Los Angeles, yes, they have their 2 Stanley Cups, but is what Dean Lombardi did to that franchise, was that worth it? I mean,
Stanley Cups are always worth it.
Oh, I mean, yes, Stanley Cups are worth it, but I don't know. I don't think the Kings are competitive again until they can be free of the Gaborik and Brown contracts because, they're never going to have any room to sign any quality players when, Kopitar is nice, Toffoli, Pearson, those are nice guys, but that's still nice. But even with their limited cap space, they're still fielding a team that is at least 30 to 40% of, minor league and bottom 6 guys.
Yeah, that's true. I think one thing, if you look at, I like what Rob Blake's kind of done so far coming in.
Oh, me too.
Taking over from
I'm a big fan of Michael Camilleri.
Yeah, like the Camilleri signing. I mean, it's a nice signing. I don't know, for $1 billion. I mean, why not, right?
Right.
But I look at this team, and it's like you say, you've got I like their top 6. Not crazy about their bottom 6. I like half their defense core. I'm a big fan of Jake Muzzin, Drew Doughty, Alex Martinez. Those guys are good players. Those are guys that you want on your team. Not so high on forward. Maybe I'm dumb on that. And I'm looking at some of these other guys.
They just don't have anybody who's ready to take the leap. And I mean,
right.
You could argue that they had that guy in McNabb, but now he's on the Vegas Golden Knights. So,
right.
I mean, I don't know. With LA, you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. Because if you give up a first-round draft pick to Vegas to hold on to McNabb, well, that's nice, but then you don't have a first-round draft pick and you don't pick up Gabe Velarde, who will be quality for them down the middle in a couple of years. So it's, I don't know. LA's in a tough position because they don't have the cap space to get better, but they don't really have a whole lot of young guys to kind of step in and start the transition either.
They're a team that always really kind of surprises me with how high all these, the Pronmans and everyone else, not that everyone's super high on their prospect pool, but I feel like I don't know what these guys are seeing that I don't.
it's that whole, been there before mindset where it's like,
Right. It's
you
like why
win
Detroit still has an amazing.
exactly, like you win a Stanley Cup and all of the sudden that makes you as an athlete better than everybody else.
Right. Do you think Daryl Sutter was a bigger problem than we were led to believe? Obviously, with Sutter going out, we heard, stories of him being locked out of the dressing room, I think the year prior. Do you think that was just something that had to run its course?
And it's funny that Daryl Sutter was fired, because there was talks of like when the Sharks last beat them, and even before that, where Daryl Sutter was going to retire as a coach, and 1 year later, and all of a sudden he's being fired. I don't think Daryl Sutter was the problem. I mean, it's like we always say, coaches are hired to be fired,
for sure.
And I just don't know how you can blame Daryl Sutter when you look at that roster, and the roster right off the hop isn't at all attractive at all. And then even their star players had down years. Like, it's not a recipe for success. And I think Daryl Sutter had to be the fall guy there, just because the head coach usually is. But
right.
I don't know. I don't think
Daryl Sutter one of those kind of curmudgeon guys where like eventually the act just gets old and the guys, tune him out. Like, I think of a lot of, there's a couple of guys like that, who I think he's one of the last few, like he's one of those last few old school coaches that's still in the league. Like, Pat Burns could go into a situation and turn that team around, but it was all diminishing returns from there.
Right.
And I kind of wonder if Daryl Sutter's in that category where it just, people just said, hey, enough of this crap.
And I don't blame them, I mean,
I'm speculating. I'm not saying that's what happened. I'm just
right.
Speculation.
But I think, you look at any other team in the NHL, how many times does the GM get fired and the head coach stays,
Mm-hmm.
And I think, yeah, exactly. Unless you're Claude Julien.
Right.
But he's been fired and rehired at least 10 times by Bruins fans. But I don't know. I think firing Dean
fired by us.
Yes, that too. Well, we fire coaches on the regular.
Coaches all the time.
But I think getting rid of Dean Lombardi was the right decision. I mean,
yeah. Oh yeah.
And you go back to those Stanley Cup years, and you get Jeff Carter. That's fine. You give up a second and you get Marian Gaborik. That's fine, because you have Stanley Cups to show for it. But when you're barely a playoff team and you're giving up first-round picks for guys like Milan Lucic and Andrei Sekera, and even picking up Chris Versteeg and, having one playoff win to show for it, like, by all means, if you're a good team and you think you can, capitalize, then by all means, go for it. But if you're barely a playoff team to begin with, know what you have. Don't, like, there's no quick fixes. It's why teams are built through the draft. You can't just I feel like Dean Lombardi thought he was playing like NHL 17, where you just signed a bunch of guys to like 1-year deals at like a crap load of money, so you get them on the team and you trade like 12 first-round picks for Connor McDavid and.
Yeah, I mean, like, for me, and like, this is like, I think this is more the fan in me than the objective me, but it's like, oh god, sleepy. 1 second. But it's okay. What was I gonna say now? I don't even know. Oh, I was gonna say, like, maybe this is the fan in me, but I feel like once you blew that compliance buyout with Mike Richards, like,
oh yeah,
how did you survive that?
Well, it's because, Dean Lombardi wanted to give old boy another chance,
Yeah, I know, but I mean, it's like, heads should roll for these things.
Well, and that's what gets you into trouble.
I got
to go for it. Sorry.
Okay, AO. I'm tired of taking out people's knees. No more. Dustin Brown to Sutter. Sleepy Mofo factor fiction. Sharks miss the playoffs. PDB gets fired, and the Sharks rehire Daryl Sutter to coach the team in 2018-19. Oh man, you know what? It wouldn't surprise me. Like, as much as I joke about it, I don't know if, like, Daryl Sutter's up there, man. I don't know if you can get him back behind an NHL bench at this point. Like, I kind of feel like he's probably done at this point. But man, I rule nothing out. I think that I think Peter DeBoer, I'm not saying he's going to get fired this year, but if the Sharks do bad, I don't know how comfortable Peter DeBoer should be.
Yeah, I mean, especially when you look at, Peter DeBoer's history with the Panthers and the Devils, it doesn't paint a very good picture when
I
this
know, and I'm tired of
consistently
defending him.
happens. Yeah, I mean,
Like, I feel like I
don't
always
know.
make a good point, but I can't defend him. Just can't. I just
I
at
don't
this
know.
point, there's so many weird things that he did last season that have
Yeah,
blown my mind that I have trouble defending Peter DeBoer at this point. If Jack
but
Capuano
even
replaces DeBoer, I am a Duke fan.
well, you can join me because they're one of my fake teams.
Oh,
But
right.
but I don't know. I look at Peter DeBoer in the same kind of situation as Daryl Sutter was. This year, should the blame ultimately fall on him? Was the lackluster roster really his fault?
No, but let's be honest. Doug Wilson is never going to go anywhere. And I'm not advocating for Doug Wilson to be fired right now. I'm just saying that, like, I think for Hasso Plattner, Doug Wilson is like his only hockey guy in that organization.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think he's going anywhere. I think, if anything, he gets promoted up the ladder. He becomes like the president. And then he still just marionettes everything still.
That's kind of what I was alluding to. And, not that it's ever been said anywhere, but that's just how it appears, especially, all the drama with Todd McClellan and that sort of stuff. But
that's the way I feel about it. I mean, I look at, people have brought up really good points for pros and cons against Doug Wilson. And, I think there's a lot to be said on both sides of that argument. There are things that I would definitely do to shake up that front office, and Doug Wilson might be one of them. But then at some point you have to, it's going to be interesting. I would like to say that the next 3 years are really, really, really gonna be critical for Doug Wilson. And I think that look at I know they had one down season and we all wanted to fire him, and we put paper bags over our heads because we're ridiculous. And but the next 3 years, these are critical because Joe Thornton, Patrick Marleau's already gone. Joe Thornton, who knows how many years Joe Thornton has left. Now you've got to rebuild this team, and your pipeline's kind of filled with bottom 6 players. So it's going to be interesting. I think the next 3 years really for the Sharks front, that's what's going to be. Guy, should probably get back to LA though. Do you think it's possible that LA can make the playoffs this year, or do you think they're out?
I think they're out. They were already worse than other Pacific Division teams before they made off-season moves, and now LA is, I don't know. I don't like what I see from LA. I mean, you could argue a healthy Jonathan Quick makes things closer for them, but like you said, they have maybe four NHL quality defensemen, and the LA Kings are kind of where the Sharks were about 8 years ago, where you have a good top 6, you have a good, you have 3 good defensemen, and then everybody else is just kind of it's, you can maybe get to the first round, but you're not going to get anywhere after that.
LA, to me, could, if the Pacific Division teams can wrangle a wild card spot, LA might be able to slide into it. I think a rebound from Kopitar. Look, at Kopitar is not as bad as he was last year. Healthy Jonathan Quick. I mean, there's not, this team isn't completely devoid of talent. And the one thing that this team has that previous incarnations of the LA Kings didn't have, they have like almost $7 million in cap space that they're just sitting on right now. So I wouldn't, and especially if you can get Gabrick on the LTIR, then you have more cap space. So as the roster stands now, I don't think it's a surefire playoff team. I think they're on the bubble for sure. I think they're, it's hard, man, because like I said, that there's so many teams where it's like, I just don't know what they are. I know what they are on paper, but I don't know what they are on the ice. Calgary. You know,
Yeah.
Arizona's my dark horse, but I mean, we've discussed on a previous show, Arizona could go completely the other way too. You know, there's an opening for LA, I think, to be a playoff team, but you know, again, it's one of these, everything kind of has to go right for them. You know, would I put money on LA making the playoffs? No. But you know, I wouldn't rule it out. Yeah, Bullock will be in the AHL. Let's be honest here.
It's hard because on one hand I see Anaheim, San Jose, Edmonton, Calgary, and Arizona all better than LA. But at the same time, you know, let's say Arizona falls on their face. Let's say Calgary falls on their face. You know, LA could easily slide right into your wild card DMs and be back into things. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's you know, this is a team where, like, I don't think that they can be, you know, I don't think this is the team of old who can just take half the season off and then just kick it into high gear for the playoff run. Like that team's long gone. But I feel like if they can, they're a team that, you know, and with as much parity as there is too, they're a team that's pesty enough that they could be in it till the bitter end. Like, I don't think they're bottoming out. I think they're in the middle somewhere. I just don't know how high in the middle. So I'm gonna go bubble team. You know, I know that's kind of a cop-out answer, but I feel like that's legitimately where they are.
No, you're absolutely right. And I feel like the Pacific being so wide open makes it that way, you know? I mean, with the I believe it was the Calgary Flames, you know, the Calgary Flames made the playoffs in a wild card spot this year, but if they were in the Central, they wouldn't even be smelling playoffs, you know?
Correct.
I think the Pacific being wide open, I think it leaves the window like an inch open for the LA Kings, and it's just a matter if they can, you know, kick it down and get back in. But they're going to have a tall order coming for them because, like I said, you know, Anaheim and Edmonton are still better. San Jose, still better. Calgary and Arizona, better, if you ask me.
Yeah, I mean, I would feel more comfortable about Los Angeles than I do about Arizona, because I feel like Arizona has to have, like, I like Arizona and I like what they've done, and you know, they're my dark horse, but I feel like so much has to go right. I feel like less has to go right for LA than Arizona.
That's fair.
You know, where Arizona needs a lot of things to go right, and one thing goes wrong and it quickly slides the other way. Whereas I feel like LA, like, there's enough still there that this is a team. Like, I think they still need scoring. You know, and I was kind of surprised I'm kind of surprised that Jágr doesn't have a deal, period. But I was kind of surprised when you know, it came out, there's an article or something that said like LA was just completely not interested, which kind of surprised me, because I felt like, you know, you look at kind of what they have, and, you know, they're a team that could use a Jaromir Jágr in a sheltered role, which is what he played in Florida last year, which is, I think, a lot of these, you know, but he's still productive. I think that people need to realize how sheltered his role was on the Panthers last season.
Well, and that's the thing too, is, you know, from LA standpoint, you can sign Jágr, you know, for free in terms of assets, and then if things don't work out, you can trade him for a draft pick. And as we've seen before, as it gets closer to the deadline, you know, teams get desperate for help, and so maybe right now nobody wants to sign Jaromir Jágr.
Mm-hmm.
But let's say hypothetically he gets a tryout and signs and plays well, and then that team trades him at the deadline. All of a sudden that team is sitting on a draft pick, all while taking a chance on a guy who nobody wanted. So it's AO saying sad. AO saying sad. But I don't know. LA needs help. Yes, they do need goal scoring, and I think Michael Camilleri helps that out. I think he's a good fit for that team.
Right.
Like, I feel like he plays like LA Kings hockey, where he's a goal scorer, but he's, you know, not a total wimp when it comes to physicality either. And but at the same time, I just think they need better defense, you know, like
Drew Doughty can't do it himself.
Exactly. And, you know, that's not all on their decor too, because you look at how many guys on the Sharks, like, it's easy to look at the Sharks roster and say, you know, they have a good decor, and that's fine. But, your bottom six, you want your bottom six to be good at defense too, because they're going to be killing
Right.
penalties. And most of the time, if you're on the road, they're the ones who are going to be getting pinned in by the opposing team's top line, which is why guys like Chris Tierney and Melker Karlsson and even Joel Ward and Yannick Hansen have had as long of careers as they have. Because, yeah, they'll chip in on the score sheet, but at the same time, you know what you have when you send them out in a penalty kill or a defensive zone draw type situation.
Yeah, that's a good point. So yeah, so final verdict, bubble team at best. Playoff contender, yes. Stanley Cup contender, hell no. Which brings us to our mailbag. Whee! So Sleepy Mofo asked me, the Sharks have approximately $8 million in cap space to play with. What do you think they do with it? I think they sit on it.
Yeah, I think they sit on it too, especially during the regular season. Every day that you're over the cap, your deadline day savings increase, and that allows you to pick up a rental. Say the Sharks have trouble scoring goals and maybe a James Neal falls into their lap. There's endless possibilities. Or a John Tavares for those of you out there. But I just think at this point, because they don't need a defenseman. I would argue that they have 8 NHL defensemen. And even for, let's say you sign a Jágr or a Vanek or, Shane Doan, Jerome McGinley, whomever, signing those guys, it pushes guys like Carpenter or LeBanc or Sorensen out of the lineup. And given the status of this team, play the young guys. You have nothing to lose at this point. If it doesn't work out, then start the rebuild or retool or reset or whatever you want to call it. I think, if you constantly stock the shelves with veterans who are kind of past the best before date, then you get into a scenario where your young guys' development take a hit. And I feel like that's what we saw with, a guy like Matt Nieto, where he looked really good from the start. And then you bring in guys like Joel Ward and, Michael Bodker and, whomever else they brought in, and it pushed him down. And it's kind of a tough situation because the Sharks should be a playoff team, but at the same time, if you don't play your young guys, you're not going to know what you have with them. And who knows?
That's kind of my problem too. When I look at this team and I see the cap space, and I think they should just go with it. See what you have, because yes, you can maybe cover your bases by bringing in a veteran. But if this team completely sucks this year, then look, you know what you have at this point. Unless you're bringing in a guy who you're gonna have for the long term, a la John Tavares, or maybe not a James Neal, but for the long term. But like a guy like John Tavares or whatever, right? Enter fantasy Shark here. Right. Unless you're gonna make a move like that, which will obviously make your team better in the long run, and Matt Duchene, for example, obviously for that, yeah, you blow your cap space for something like that. But at the same time, if this team's terrible this year, then why? Just why? And why spend that cap space? Why artificially make your team better when the core is rotten? Do you build your house on a crappy foundation? Well, that's what the Sharks would be doing if they bring someone in. They need to see what they have with the kids. They need to, and then look at it. If the team's bad, then maybe you don't blow that money at the deadline. You save it up, and you see what you can get for a Joel Ward, a Yannick Hansen, dare I say a Joe Thornton. Not that I think that Joe Thornton would waive, but you put it out there.
Yeah, and
this draft's going to be good. I mean, the Sharks can pick up a few more draft picks. And they can actually maybe draft some decent players. Now, I'm not holding my breath there, but
for those who are of the belief that the Sharks need defensemen, and there is a degree to which that is truthful, but at the same time, I don't think it's a number one need.
I don't buy into that at all. Yeah, like I feel like I like what's there. Look at you still got DeMello, who I think is a serviceable bottom pair guy. You have Tim Heed that could come in and be serviceable as well. Unless you're moving, you'd have to move somebody. You have to move a Justin Braun, a Paul Martin to bring someone else in.
Exactly, and that's, I don't know, like, say you want to look to the future, there are some good defensemen who are going to be in this draft. I mean, I don't think, if the Sharks draft Rasmus Dahlin, God, I will be surprised. But, there are other guys who are quality defensemen who we've seen in the past, players of that caliber do slip, and teams, who pick them up make other teams pay for it. And I don't know. I think the Sharks do need to just see what they have with this roster. And then let's say they're in a good spot and could just, use a little something to push them over a little bit more.
Use the cap space for sure.
Exactly. And that's kind of why I go back to it. James Neal, it would suck, but let's say you give LeBanc or Sorensen some top line time and they look good. All of a sudden, if you really are desperate for a James Neal, you have a piece right there. Like, hey, this guy's young, he's fast, he can score goals. It's, there's endless possibilities, and I feel like the Sharks have too much of the same type of player, if that makes sense.
No, I agree. They have the trusty bottom six, two-way, plays a good game, safe game, blah 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 blah. Like that's their whole pipeline. The defense, like there's some interesting pieces down there. Like, I still like Julius Bergman, but there's got to be a lot of improvement there. I really like Joakim Ryan. Obviously, I've sang the praises of Joakim Ryan a billion times. But beyond that, I mean, I know Zach likes Semic. I haven't seen Semic play, so I can't say anything to that effect. But yeah, I don't know. I just don't know what to expect from there's some decent players down there. There's players I like. There's players that could have some top six upside. I think Daniel Regan could have some top six upside on the wing. I think when you looked at the list of the 3 years from now thing, I believe also from the Hockey News that we all kind of giggled at. Like, I know some people like, was O'Regan on the wing, but I really feel like O'Regan on the wing is a key to his success at the NHL level, to be, in my humble opinion.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. I mean, he, with the Barracuda, he played well at center, but I feel like in the games that I've seen him, I'm not overly confident in his face-off abilities. And in the AHL, you can kind of get away with that, but at the NHL, like, winning face-offs is everything.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's important. And yeah, I just think like size wise too, I think he'd be a shifty, he'd be really shifty on the wing. He's smart. Like he's got good vision, and I feel like he plays he plays well. It's gonna be interesting to see, because like I said, this season could go one of two ways. And I mean, that's really terrible to say, because I mean, it seems really cliche, but we could come trade deadline, we could be talking about rebuilding, or we could be talking about gearing up for the playoffs. I mean, it's going to be really interesting to see what happens this season in San Jose. And I know it seems like really cop-outy, wishy-washy, but like they're just that's where they are. I mean, they're in the middle of the pack now. They're no longer in the front half of the pack in the Western Conference anymore. And I will debate that with anyone.
Well, and that's a good point too, because I feel like even that year where the Sharks missed the playoffs and there was all that turmoil, I still feel like there was some semblance of ability that the Sharks could be a playoff team, and things kind of spun off the rails around the middle of the season. But this time around, like, if the Sharks aren't a playoff team by December, January, it shouldn't come as a surprise.
No, I don't think so. And that's the other thing too. Like, you brought up a good point. And look, it wasn't like, this past season we just had. I mean, yes, the playoffs sucked because everyone got hurt, but the Sharks for the second half of the season, before everyone got hurt, not a fun team to watch.
Yeah, there's even if they were completely healthy in March, there's no excuse for how they played.
No. I mean, that's the unfortunate thing, I think. And I think that's the one thing, like, people, again, I know that some of us are more fan than, logical thinking, and that's fine. Look, I'm not telling you how to fan. Like, everyone can't try and look at everything super objective, like I attempt to do. And I don't say I do it all the time, but that's kind of the way I try to approach things, is as objectively as possible. And if you look at that last season and you look at how the end of the season kind of went, like, that alone should make you scared going into. That's what scares me going into the season, because when you had the team at, basically, at the beginning of the season, we posted, oh, wow, this is one of the best rosters we've ever had. And this is better than the Cup team.
And it should have been, but a lot of guys underperformed.
Should have been. Right. No, exactly. And so, I mean, when you look at that performance when they were at full strength before everyone got hurt, that's what scares me into the season. Because if they can't start the season, like you said, if they're not at a certain point by January, they're done. Yeah. They're absolutely done. And we'll be talking about rebuilding maybe sooner than that. I hope not. I mean, as a fan, I don't want to sit here. I don't want this podcast to be a downer. All right. I don't want to talk about, future drafts and maybe tomorrow. And, I don't want this to be a downer. Obviously, we'll try and keep happy. But again, I think, going back to earlier in the show, is the Sharks missing the playoffs completely out of bounds? No, it's not. And anyone who thinks that it is delusional, and that's okay. Because sometimes fandom does weird things to our minds, but yeah. I don't know. I just want to scroll through the chat, make sure I didn't miss anything. I feel like we're good tonight. We did good.
Sleepy Mofo says he needs a new bobblehead giveaway besides Pavelski, and I suggested that they should do a Bodker one.
Can we shoot at it with like pellet guns or something? Maybe he does good.
I've made it very apparent in the public that I'm on Team Bodker still. I mean, there's no reason to think he can't bounce back.
Well, I mean, I want him to, because again, fan.
Right. But even as an impartial commentator, if you want to call it that, he has not given me a reason to think that this season is indicative of his career with the Sharks as a whole. I mean, I hate to make this parallel, but you look at when he was on Arizona, some of those teams were not good teams, and he still put up pretty good stats. So I think he's had a year to get used to things, and whether it's Logan Couture or Thomas Hertl or, God willing, Joe Thornton, I think he's going to come around this season. And if I'm wrong, by all means, let me know about it.
Yeah. No, I mean, I hope he turns around. Look, it's going to be a huge key for the Sharks to turn things around. Is you're going to need contributes by a lot of sorry, I got distracted. You're going to see, a lot of these guys that need to step up and put points on the board this year. Like, you need to replace Patrick Marleau's offense, because I think, and what's funny, the thing is, like, and I know I keep bashing Jágr, and I don't know why people listen to me anymore. A lot of people have been like, oh, look at Jágr's points, look at Marleau's points. And it's like, yes, but you don't understand that the situations that Marleau played in were a lot more difficult than the situations that Jágr played in. Again, these things matter. You have to look at what role you're playing. Like, yes, look at Jágr's Jágr. I think he's fantastic. I don't think he's a fit for the Sharks, because I feel like the travel would kill him by the end of the year.
Yeah.
Like, it scares me. I love Jágr, but like, this team, we don't need to install oxygen tanks on the bench for our senior citizens. That's not what this team should be about at this point.
And
is Donskoy going to have a background season? I hope so. I love Donskoy. Everyone knows I love Donskoy.
And you made a really good point like a couple of minutes ago, and I already forgot. Oh, no. Okay, I remember. You mentioned that somebody's going to have to replace Barlow's 27 goals, and you're right. Those 27 goals do need to be replaced, but here's the thing. Those 27 goals weren't enough to get it done.
Right. But you need to still replace them, and it's going to have to be done by committee. Like, I'm not saying one guy has to step up and get all those goals.
Oh, absolutely not. My point, though, is that, yes, the 27 goals needs to be made up, but it's going to take more than 27 goals to get things rolling on this team. So
it's
going to be
another show.
Yeah, I feel like we could break this down for hours.
Hours and hours and hours and hours. All right, guys, we're going to free you from our crazy show. Thanks for watching our show. Obviously, this show was done really kind of not super close to the last one, but close enough, I guess, right? We did our last show, Thursday?
Yeah, I believe it was Thursday.
So I mean, doing a Monday show, I mean, it's obviously a big deal. I'm glad that you guys are all typing, so obviously you can still see. I can't, which is unfortunate. But yeah, I'm really glad you guys came and listened to the show after we did one so short. I don't know when the next show will be. Now, Teal Tinted Glasses is not an Ian operation. It can happen without Ian, and this can happen. So if you harass Jerk and Kevin enough, maybe they'll go without me. I don't know. I'm not telling them they should. But I don't know when I will be back. As we know, surgery, blah, 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 terrible, in the hospital, morphine clicky thing. It's going to be great. But we will, as soon as I can go, I'll be back, and I will be back on Twitter and saying all my silly, silly stuff. If you, next team is going to be the Calgary Flames, and then I believe it will be the Golden Knights. Does that sound right?
Yeah, sounds right to me.
Good, and we'll save the Sharks for last. So I think that, so obviously, thank you guys. Definitely, again, I'm going to try not to make this like a super, super routine thing, but check out my stuff on Puck Pros. I know most of it's not specifically Sharks related, but your support helps me. Obviously, readership is good when you're getting paid by clicks. So I should live stream on Morphine. I probably won't have a private room, or I totally would. We could have like an Ian question and answer on Morphine. That would be, we'd see how smart I really am. But yeah, definitely, please check out my work on Puck Pros. I've been doing an X Factor series. Unfortunately, I don't think I'm going to be able to finish it just because of our like our preseason coverage obviously kicking in. So there's going to be a lot of work I have to do there. And I feel like the X Factor series might be a little redundant with some of it. So I might get a couple more done. But other than that, though, we're going to have like a ton of preseason stuff looking into different things. So please, again, come read my stuff. You can always find my stuff. I always tweet out my stuff. I always, I post my stuff on my personal Facebook page that you can like, which is very awesome. And you can also find it on the Teal Tinted Glasses Facebook group, which you can join. I will put it in the chat. I feel like I'm just rambling now. So Hockey Jerk, final words.
Oh, final words. Okay. The Sharks might make the playoffs. No guarantee, of course. I am not a Pittsburgh Penguins fan or a Anaheim Ducks fan. I just pretend to be. And you can follow me on Twitter at hockey_jerk. Look, KHL season started today with St. Petersburg and the Red Army playing in the opening cup. And then my team, Magnitogorsk, will be starting their season on the 23rd. So you'll be hearing a lot about that from me. And I do not have any surgeries going on. So I will be around unless I start to ghost again. Yeah, it's going to be fun times. We are glad that you've stuck with us through a very slow and, depending on what part of the world you're in, hot summer. And the regular season kicking off will make things uberly exciting.
Absolutely. And also, obviously, I'd be remiss if I did not mention tealtintedglasses.com, where I also occasionally submit stuff. And you can also obviously find this podcast. Very important stuff here, people. Follow us on Twitter at TTG Reborn. You can follow me on Twitter at Ian Blogs Hockey. Hockey Jerk is at hockey_jerk. And that is, I'm saying a lot, and that's bad. Thank you guys for your well wishes for my recovery. I hope that it'll be quick, and I'll be back and talking to you sooner than later. That is it for tonight, guys. Have a great night. Follow us on Twitter. Follow us on all our social medias. Subscribe. Have a good night. Bye.